All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for those of you that are putting in where you're coming, where you're joining us today from. I see Philadelphia, I see DC, California so far is the furthest one away. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And again, welcome to our second Training Officers Consortium event of this year. I want to welcome you to actually our first TOC Growth Guild. Again, Growth Guild is new this year. So I want to welcome you all that, and I just want to give everyone a reminder. For those of you that are new to TOC, we like to remind our community of why we are here. TOC was created due to a need and desire to share best practice across the community in support of developing our federal L&D professionals in partnership with each other, with our academia partners, as well as our industry partners. And how we do that is by strengthening through various events. We're building, we're reinforcing, and we're strengthening our community and our competencies in the learning and development arena, training, education, by bringing our shared resources together. As you can see from our mission here, we have a number of professional development opportunities. We utilize our resources. We share best practices. We have our website up, and we have a number of events we have throughout the year. And throughout this year, we started the Growth Guild, which we have once a day, which is 60 to 90-minute webinars. That gives us enough time to really listen to the content that's being provided and engage in a robust discussion afterwards and throughout the session. Our solution sessions, we'll be taking a deep dive, and this year we'll be taking that deep dive into Disrupt Everything and Win, book by Patrick Ledden and James Patterson. We have our Learning and Development Showcase, which we had at the end of March, where we look at some of the successful programs that we're conducting across our agencies. And we share that across the community. Okay, who else or what else can I bring to my own agency? What does TOC have? What does TOC community have that we can utilize and leverage? And then more, variety of different learning events, certifications, train the trainers, networking socials and media meetups will provide some insight into what else is happening across the learning and development field. And with that being said, our calendar for this year, our growth guilds are going to be the first Tuesdays of every month from 11 to 12:30, unless something has occurred, we have to shift it and reschedule. Our L&D showcases are the third Thursdays, also from starting 11. Again, shifting as necessary as if things occur. Our quarterly solution sessions will be 2.5 to 3 hours, aiming for the late mornings, September, December, March, and June. Again, we're going to be going over and going through the book, Disrupt Everything and Win. Our summit for this year, for TOC 26 Summit, it's going to be held in Philadelphia. It's going to be August 6th and 7th. So the 6th is going to be our pre-summit reception that evening in Philadelphia. And the 7th will be our full day summit, where we're all going to be in the same room going through the same material. And again, note, lodging is not included. But how do we get to the summit? How do we take advantage of all these different opportunities we have and some of those items that are for registrants only? Well, registration is now open. So registration for the 26-27 year is available, which includes costs for the summit. And our website is right there in the chat. So don't do this right now. But when you get a chance, go ahead and grab that website and look into it, and really go into our new website that was designed by Amy, that has a lot of information for you to glean over and jump into. And we have the price portions are there as well, depending if you just want the year or if you want the summit as well, or if you just want the summit for various individuals. That was a lot in a little bit of time. And what I'd like to do is introduce Ms. Natalie Layler-Kylander, who is the faculty chair of the Senior Executive Fellows from the Harvard Kennedy School at Harvard University. She is going to be discussing today Authentic Leadership, a self-driven or self-assessment driven workshop. So I'd like to hand it over to Natalie.
Thank you very much, Joy. I'm going to share my slides, try to get those up for everybody. I'm going to try to do it in presentation mode. Let me know if that looks okay. Joy, does that look okay on your end?
The edit mode.
Let's see if I can change that. Thank you for your patience.
And we did test this out. It did work. But with technology,
Always the way. Yeah.
There's always something.
Let's see. Nope, I don't think I can get it back. So we may have to deal with some reason I'm not able to get it back.
Would you like me to share my screen?
It might be better if I did it just because it's a little tricky for me to move forwards. I'm going to try one more thing. Thank you for your patience, everybody. All right. If this doesn't work, I will ask you to help me.
You're good.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. So thank you, everybody. Apologies for the technical snafus. It is a pleasure to be here. Our mission at the Harvard Kennedy School is to support you all in your missions, and we are very grateful to be able to do that today. What I'd like to do is go through a series of slides, and then I can't see my slides, which is really bizarre. Hang on. Yes, this did work perfectly before. Well, I'll do what I can. So we've got a series of slides here, and I wanted to talk about authentic leadership, but I also wanted to give you a sense of how authentic leadership is positioned within the leadership framework space. For some reason, I cannot see my own screen, so it's going to be hard for me to move forwards. Doing some really strange things here. You know what I might ask you, Joy, is I'm going to stop sharing and maybe ask you to share. I'm having trouble getting my seeing my presentation for some reason.
Got it. There you go.
All right, thank you, and apologies again. If you could go to the next slide, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So, in terms of the agenda, I'm going to do a little introduction about who I am and the programs that we run here at the Harvard Kennedy School, specifically designed for members of the federal government. And there are two in particular that I want to talk about. And then I'll spend some time defining authentic leadership. And then we'll go straight into implementing authentic leadership. There are 5 key practices, and we'll do those together. And within those practices, there are some self-assessments. So you'll have some time to actually run those self-assessments, get the results, and then we'll open it up and talk about that, and hopefully close a little bit ahead of time so that we can have some dialogue as well. Next slide, please. So one of the things I really wanted to emphasize is that leadership is a verb. And so we often think about leadership as a position in a hierarchy or a set of personal characteristics. But we really believe that anyone and actually everyone can exercise leadership. And it's really more about a set of actions and activities that you're undertaking to drive change. And so within that, it's about setting a direction, explicitly articulating a vision, building alignment among the different stakeholders, and really creating the motivation and the support for change. And within that, leadership is about who you are, and authentic leadership in particular really requires a lot of self-awareness and self-knowledge. Moving to the next screen, thank you. So you can click through Joy a couple of times. So authentic leadership is one of the many leadership frameworks that you might have encountered. Back in the 40s, the predominant leadership model was transactional leadership, which was really sort of the idea that a leader had the power and the resources to reward people or to punish them. And so it was a transactional sort of arrangement. And then transformational leadership sort of evolved after that. And transformational leadership is really the idea that instead of appealing to extrinsic motivation, that you're really appealing to more intrinsic motivation, and it can be akin to the soft power principle, of really motivating people to buy into to a leader's vision. And there are a number of other models like ethical leadership, as well as adaptive leadership and situational leadership, which is much more about the leader adapting either to the followers or the people in his or her team, and also supporting them. Another one that you might know or have heard of is servant leadership, and that's sort of flipping the triangle of the hierarchy on its head, so that the leader of the organization really is in support of their direct reports, and those direct reports are in support of their direct reports, and so on until you get to the customer or the stakeholder that you're serving. So I just wanted to mention that because authentic leadership does sit sort of on a spectrum of different leadership models, but it's really about self-awareness. And it's about understanding your background and events in your life that have shaped you to be who you are, as well as your personality and values. And so we'll be going through a lot of those characteristics. But essentially, authentic leadership has sort of 5 dimensions. The first is the idea of purpose. Leaders need to understand what is it that motivates them, what drives them, what are the problems they want to solve, and keep that sort of front and center as a North Star. It's really about building relationships with the people that you work with, as well as others in your organization and across organizations. So the relationship piece of authentic leadership is pretty key. Values, being really aware and living by your values is another component of the authentic leadership model, as well as the heart and self-discipline. We'll go into those a little bit more, but the objective really is to be very self-aware of one's values, motivations, purpose, and spend the time and the energy to build relationships with others so that you are anchoring your leadership in those relationships and building a lot of trust. Next slide, please. So these five components we've talked about a little bit, purpose, relationships, but I wanted to spend a moment on self-discipline, because that's one of the five characteristics of authentic leaders. And it's really this idea that you are able to hold yourself accountable for your behaviors and your actions in a way that is into the concept of a growth mindset, so that even as you're faced with challenges and setbacks, that you're framing that experience as an opportunity to learn. And so that's sort of the self-discipline. The heart piece of authentic leadership is really anchored in emotional intelligence. And that's the ability to empathize with others, as well as regulate and self-regulate one's own emotions. And that's a really important piece of authentic leadership. Next slide, please. Sorry, Joy, if I can have the next slide, please. Thank you. I think we'll skip this one. Let's go to the next one. So some of you, I think, will have heard of Brene Brown, and I like this piece on authenticity that she writes about, because she says that authenticity is not something that you have or don't have, but that it's a continual practice and a conscious choice. And so authentic leadership is in that same vein. It does require a continuous sort of growth mindset, an approach, which is anchored in a decision to live by your values every day. And so Brene Brown says this is a choice, right? We have a choice. And authenticity is a practice. And so being able to practice authenticity is a really important component of the authentic leadership framework. Next slide, please. So it sounds like a lot of work practicing authentic leadership. You can click through here, Joy. Thank you. But their studies have shown that the benefits of practicing authentic leadership results in better relationships, higher levels of trust, which actually translate to greater productivity and a more positive work environment. One of the big challenges that we are seeing right now is employee turnover. And so employee satisfaction and being able to retain employees has both, has a large number of positive benefits, including financial benefits. But so authentic leadership has been associated with better retention in the workforce, but also better team decision making and success. And so while it does seem like it's a lot of work and self-reflection and continuous choice in showing up and being an authentic leader, there are some tangible benefits as well. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I've been talking about the growth mindset, which is a concept that Carol Dweck really touched upon and developed probably in the 1970s now. But the growth mindset is the belief that intelligence can be developed, that our mind is plastic, and that we can learn to do things differently. And that requires really embracing, in a way, challenges and failures, but thinking about them as an opportunity to learn and to grow. And so the growth mindset is also linked with the ability to ask for feedback and to integrate that feedback into our own learning and evolution. And so as a leader, evolution as a leader. And so it's very important component of authentic leadership is the ability to ask for feedback and to integrate that feedback, but also to sort of reflect on our both our successes and our challenges, so that we're always evolving and always thinking about ourselves as a leader. Next slide, please. All right. So there are five components of authentic leadership, but what I want us to spend the bulk of our time together is really thinking about the practices of authentic leadership, and there are five of them as well. But we'll go through these and start thinking and doing some brainstorming, and thinking about these five. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'd like to invite you to do is to think about the major events in your life and how those events have shaped you to become the person you are now. This is sort of your life story. Think back on your life and what were some of the pivotal moments in your life that made you who you are now. The other thing I want you to reflect on, and then we'll do some sharing and I'd love to invite your reflections. But the other thing I'd like you to invite you to do is to think about role models, who were your role models growing up, and what did you learn from them? And don't think just about your positive role models. Also reflect on role models that you observed and that you thought, wow, I never want to be like this person. You can learn a lot from, I would say, negative role models. So maybe spend about 5 minutes on this idea of major crucible events in your life that made you who you are, and then potential role models that you had growing up. Just sort of get your creative thinking going. For me personally, becoming a mother was a major event that really shifted my self-perception, but also how I wanted to show up in life and in work. And then my grandmother was my strong role model. She raised 6 children and was a university professor, so it was a bit hard to live up to that role model. But I really observed how she made decisions and how she carried herself, and it had a huge impact on what I aspired to be. So I'll let you reflect quietly for about 5 minutes, and we'll come back together in that time. I think, Joy, I'm going to try again to load my slides, so I think you can stop share.
Okay. You said 5 minutes, so 11:28. Everyone should be back and ready to share.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I see your first slide.
just take another couple of minutes, and then I'd love to open it up if anybody is brave enough to share their reflection.
I think I can share. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah, go ahead.
Because it seemed like everybody was so excited to share. So I decided I'll share first. So, looking at my role models, I was an athlete by trade, interested in going into medicine and everything else. But my real role model was my father and mother. Um, Growing up, my father was just known by everybody as an approachable person, willing to help people. He was an educator. Um, Unlike a lot of people that would punish by getting beat, and that kind of stuff. Uh, he made me read books and do book reports and that type of stuff, and I never knew I would really appreciate that till later in life. My mother being the same, she worked as well as, you know, I have a younger sister and she made sure we were at school. She walked with us to school. She was part of the school, um, heavy into the church. She became the mother of the church and she took on those type of roles. And I never knew what that impact would be like until, you know, I decided to go into the military. I went in the military. My father said I would never make it because of just who I was and how, rebellious I could be at a time. But that motivated me in a way that I stayed in the military. And what I thought I wouldn't be, I actually became. I became my father because what I do now, I work with the VA and I teach leadership courses, and I spend a lot of time mentoring people, my staff and people around me, and even people that have come and gone that were my students. And then on top of that, the birth of my child became, the motivating factor that I could now pass on what my father and mother taught. And that's a little bit about sharing.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's true that we are shaped by the people we grow up with, and both, I think, in positive and maybe less positive ways. What's interesting about what you said, Houston, which I see in others, is when we are told you'll never be this or you are not going to be able to do that. And that can actually be a very strong motivator, powerful intrinsic motivator to prove people wrong. But also it's interesting how what we might be critical of in our parents at a younger age, we want to emulate at a later stage. Thank you for sharing. That was very, very interesting. Sonia, go ahead, please.
Good morning, family. Very similar to my friend Houston. My dad and Dr. Mae Jemison are my role models. I love space and I love history. And I remember wanting to be in advanced placement history class in Auburn, Alabama. And the teacher said no, and the principal said no. And my daddy called the superintendent of Auburn City Schools and said my daughter's going to be in that class. And I was like, yay. And in the advanced placement class, the highest score you can get is a 5. I got a 4 in that exam, and most of the smarty pants in the class got 1s and 2s and 3s. So it just solidified to me when someone believes in you, you can do amazing things. Which leads me to Dr. Mae Jemison, first African American woman in space, born in Alabama like me, even though she claims Chicago. And she has a TED talk where she talks about her project 100 Year Starship, and she says it's not about the people who go to space. It's the people who do the work to get them there. We all have something to do. So yes, I'm not the greatest in physics and chemistry, and I'll probably never work at NASA and JPL, but I can do something to get people to space for something that I love. So those two people really stand out to me because they keep me dreaming about possibilities. With that,
That's so lovely, Sonia. I think this idea of somebody believing in you and creating that motivation in yourself is a really important feature. And I love the way you sort of expressed your purpose as being part of something that you love. You don't necessarily need to be the face of space exploration, but being part of it in some way. As a big motivating factor for you. That's really great. Anybody else wanted to share a reflection? I think it's really helpful as you support others and mentor others to understand the role that you can play, either as a role model or, in your children's lives, in your staff lives. How do you support others in their leadership journey, and the importance that role models and experiences have in terms of becoming who we are and how we want to spend our time. Anybody else before we move forwards? Go ahead, Scott.
Let's try that. You hear me okay?
Yeah, now it's good.
Sorry. So I'm glad you said experiences because, I think some of the people that impacted me as positive and not so positive role models are pretty similar to the first couple folks who kind of weighed in. But as I think back across my life, I think there were some significant events, right? So probably, early on enlistment in military service, a marriage, a divorce, becoming a father, being a single parent for about 4 years before I remarried, which was, I think those events really kind of shaped me. And then leaving the military, right? 25, almost 26 years later, was a significant event for me. Uh, I think death of parents is a significant life event that
Yeah.
not pleasant, but I think it impacts us and kind of adjusts our outlook on life. And then, um, post military service, you know, uh, becoming a survival instructor out at the SEER school, right? It was a brand new kind of thing for me in the civilian world to do that as opposed to being in the military. And I found another family in that for about 10 years. And then the school experience and not so much, I don't think in my bachelor's program or master's program, but I completed my PhD out at Gonzaga. And I think the process itself, for me, it's not the shingle on the wall, right? I mean, I've got that thing folded up somewhere in a shelf, but I think the process of thinking and philosophizing and understanding, uh, what authentic leadership was during that journey for me at Gonzaga was kind of really a life-changing event for me. Um, and it really shaped my worldview in ways that I didn't expect. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of cool to reflect back on those events and really ask myself, like, how did it shape you? How are you different
Yeah.
now? And I think I'm still changing, right? I think everybody does, and I hope they do anyway. So, yeah, thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. That's really interesting, Scott. And all these life events that start to accumulate, and the transitions that we go through do shape who we are. And there's a lot of literature and research coming out now around resilience and how our resilience gets built and shaped over time, and our ability to empathize with a variety of different people is also shaped by a series of experiences and events that happen in our life. So those are, I think, are great reflections. Thank you so much for sharing that. Appreciate that. Let me see if I can go back to go back to my PowerPoint, and apologies if it's not in the presentation mode. I'm not quite sure how to do it. So hopefully, hopefully you see something here. What I'd like to do now is move to the next practice of authentic leadership. And this is where there's a self-assessment that I'd really welcome you to do. So this is about taking stock of who you are now, as we talked about. When you review your life and the experiences that you have, and you reflect on the role models that have shaped you, there's also an opportunity now to sort of take a snapshot of where you are now. And the personality assessment that I'd like to invite you to do is called the Ocean or the Big Five. And it builds on other personality assessments. And it's really the most broadly used in psychology today. But it has 5 dimensions, and we all sit somewhere on the spectrum of these 5 dimensions. They spell out ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which is a terrible word. But essentially, we all are somewhere along the spectrum of these 5 traits or characteristics. And so openness, you know, I just want to be clear that one is not better than the other. You can have a low score on openness, but that means you're perhaps very practical, that you really enjoy routine, as opposed to having a very high score on openness, where you're more like a butterfly, interested in a lot of different things, maybe more independent and curious. So I just want to make sure that I'm not presenting this as high scores being good and low scores being bad. And we have a tendency to sit somewhere along each of these spectra. But conscientiousness, for example, low conscientious scores might be slightly disorganized. This is my lowest score. When I first got the results, I was like, what? I'm super conscientious. But it is true that I'm slightly disorganized. And so having that knowledge is helpful, not because I can look at myself and say, okay, you need to get yourself organized and a lot more careful. But it does say, for me as a leader, I am better off surrounding myself or partnering with people who are pretty high on consciousness in terms of being able to be organized and help me stay on track and help me be organized. So I want to make sure that you understand that it's not good or bad whether you're low on high or high on any of these scores, but it does give us some insight into our own leadership and the ability to partner or work with others that might complement our strengths and our weaknesses. So having said that, let's move to the assessment itself. If I can figure out how to do that. I'm just going to flip forwards. Oh, that's not the right one. Very confusing here. All right, sorry. So if you type in the following, and I think Joy is going to put the link in the chat, but basically if you type in big5-test.com, it'll take you through a series of multiple choice questions, and you'll get a report at the end. You need to be able to click on the next button, and sometimes there's an ad that pops up, but you just ignore the ad and keep clicking through the questions. It should take you about 10 to 15 minutes to do. And then we'll take a little moment to take an assessment and look at that. Any questions? Joy, are you able to put it in the chat?
Yes, it's in the chat. And if you are a member of DISA or some of the DoD, you may not be able to visit that site. It is currently blocked for some of us.
I apologize for that.
but I think most of the federal agencies can access it. So for those DoD members that are teleworking, grab your phone. And you said 15 minutes, so we'll regroup again at 11:55.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I did find a few that I can access from the duty.
Okay, let's take a few more minutes to finish up if we can.
That's a shame.
So I'm not sure if you had enough time to go through that, but also to take a look at the results. And there's quite a lot of detail in there, but maybe just look at the first page of results. Oh, Joy is saying it's not free. That link should have given you access to downloadable results.
The one that you provide probably does, but the one that those of us that have high firewalls,
I see.
so I try to give two other options for them, but one of the ones that I can access through my firewall isn't free.
All right. Okay. All right. So it looks like we've had a couple of maybe some challenges actually getting the results. But if anybody did have the opportunity to take a look at their results, I'm curious how they resonated and whether you felt like they were accurate or not. One thing I always say when we do self-assessments is that you have to take it with a pinch of salt, right? How you answer the questions, how quickly you answer the questions, what frame of mind you're answering the questions does have an impact on the results itself. But if anybody did have a chance to take a quick look, I'm curious whether they felt like that was reflective of them or whether they learned something new about themselves. And feel free to raise your hand. It's a bit challenging to do online, and I can't see anybody. Everybody is just a name, so it's hard for me to tell whether this was useful or not.
I could
Thanks,
go ahead.
Erin. Oh, thanks, Houston. That would be great.
So, looking at it, and I got a chance to look at the results. I haven't digested everything, but
Right.
I thought it was pretty close to being spot on. I thought I was a little higher in um, my openness to experience. That was surprising to me. Um, just just by I'm very everybody says I'm very predictable. I'm the same way all the time. But I'm a motivator. I'm the one in the office that walks around and talks to people all the time, that type of thing. So some of the scores I knew were pretty close, but the openness to the experience surprised me.
Super interesting. It sounds like you're very consistent and people know what to expect, which is a great trait for a leader. But it also might be something worth exploring. What does it mean that your score is lower than you thought you might be in terms of openness? Let me ask you a follow-up question, and this is really for everybody, but do you feel like our scores might change and evolve over time? And why?
Well, when I teach, I talk about being situational. So we always talk about, what type of leader you are, but and everybody strays away from being that, you know, that totalitarian leader, right? Nobody wants to be that leader, but sometimes the task or what you're asked to do requires it. Where everybody wants to say, let me get some information, let's make a decision together. But sometimes things happen so quickly, then you just take charge and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. this is what we need to do and everything else. So I think situationally, the scores could change.
That's an interesting point. I mean, when there is a very short time period or there's an emergency of some kind, and also, depending what kind of organization you're in, you are going to have to tap into being more transactional and more authoritarian. And so I think you're right. Your authentic leadership can be a certain way and be very consistent. But there are certain situations where you just need to make executive decisions and move forwards. The research on this is really interesting in that if you do that too much as a leader, you reduce the trust actually in your followers, unless you're being very explicit about the reasons and the situations in which you will act in that way. So, those are really interesting reflections. Anybody else want to share either if they found something interesting or surprising in their results, or whether they believe that the insight that we get from these kinds of self-assessments provides an opportunity for us to sort of explore what kind of leaders we are and how we want to show up in our leadership.
It's a quiet group.
It's a quiet group. I'm worried that people didn't get the opportunity to do the self-assessment. And if you didn't manage or didn't have a chance to do it today, I definitely recommend doing it or something similar on a fairly regular basis, because to Houston's point, in different situations, as the context changes, it might evolve. In terms of Scott, go ahead. Thank you.
So I'll just weigh in generally. I went through the assessment as well, but I got to the, hey, send me some money stage, so couldn't complete it. But very interesting questions, and I think assessments in general, and I have a little bit of experience in this. And there's a assessment out there called the Authentic Leadership Questionnaire, which is delivered by Mind Garden. And I think the book you're talking about, Bill George, I think there's a version of that in the book.
That's right.
It's kind of a shortened version. But I will say that, and I just have some of this knowledge from my studies and the dissertation I wrote at Gonzaga, and that assessments are great, but there is something called self-bias, and there's self-evaluation bias and self-verification theory that just suggests that we have to enter into all assessments with a little bit of, okay, it's not without its blind spots. In other words, we have to look at the other side and realize that, for example, self-verification theory, right? We're going to put a lot of effort into confirming both positive and negative self-views so that we can arrive at this place of psychological coherence, basically so we can feel good about ourselves. If we're really high in terms of, our belief in ethical behaviors and good moral behaviors, we're going to self-report that behavior at a greater tendency. And those aren't bad things, right? It's just one of those things to be aware of. So at the end of the day, these things are great tools for kind of learning about that first kind of the research tell you that first tenet is self-awareness. You've already mentioned it, right? Of authentic leadership, and they're great tools that let us kind of reflect a little bit as you've been talking about during the lesson. So yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate it.
No, I couldn't agree more. You really do have to take it with a pinch of salt, because what frame of mind you're in or what happened to you this morning has an influence. So the best way to counter some of that confirmation bias that you're talking about is to try to answer the question really quickly without thinking about it too much. But it still will always have an element of bias and in it. So that's very useful framing. I think to your point, what's interesting is that some of these dimensions, I think, also change over time. So the conscientiousness piece might change over time, but actually the neuroticism, which is a terrible word, but it basically means the extent to which things become sort of negative and you perceive situations to be more complicated or more difficult than they might actually be, that does decrease over time. So as we get older and we've lived through many more things and our resilience is higher, we have a tendency over time to be a little less or a little bit lower on that neuroticism scale. So I think there's good hope for us, or good news for us as we get older. There are some dimensions that we get better at. Let's see. Let's move on. I want to get to this values exercise because I think it's a really important exercise for us to kind of understand. Let me see if I can get back to my screen here. And I apologize for being so bad. I'm usually much better at sharing my screen, and it seems to have disappeared for some crazy reason. So I think I may have shut down my PowerPoint by mistake.
Do you want me to share it?
I think I'm back in, thank you, because otherwise I lose what I'm seeing. Let's see. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Scroll down.
Yes.
Scroll down. So apologies. So yeah, so it's interesting to do these self-assessments, I think, with a pinch of salt, as Scott mentioned, because we can sometimes find pieces of information or insight that are interesting and revealing. There are sort of let's shift now. So one of the practices of authentic leadership is sort of this growth mindset and really thinking, having a practice of reflection and self-reflection. A reflective practice is really part of continuing to practice authentic leadership. And so one option is to keep a journal. And sort of keep notes around what you're learning about situations that occur. Might be really useful to see if there are patterns that emerge in the way you deal with challenges or successes, actually. And the other thing to do is to perhaps work on a leadership challenge that you are experiencing. And you can do one of two things. You can get together with others and talk about the challenge that you're facing and how you're approaching it, so that it's sort of like a sort of a group of you who want to share your experience and help each other. We do that very often in our executive education programs, where we place participants in study groups, and those study groups tend to stay together after the program, after the courses, and help each other through their leadership challenges. And so that might be a practice that you might want to start with a group of friends or a group of colleagues, and they meet about once a month. But the idea is to maintain some tools to keep that growth mindset and that reflective practice alive in your sort of on a systematic way. So I'm going to shift now to the idea of understanding your core values. I'm hoping that you are able to get into this Taproot assessment. The reason I like it is that it helps you it helps synthesize down a couple of key, it's a framework and an exercise that takes you through a number of steps to help you identify a handful of core values. It'd be great to get down to 3 if you can. And what's really interesting about this particular assessment is that it also helps you attach a verb to the value so that you're not just coming up with a value like, optimism, which is one of my values, but that you're actually trying to think about what would it look like to actualize that value. So for me, that value of optimism, I want to live with optimism. That's how I want to live my life, with an optimistic frame. And fairness was another value that came out for me very strongly. And I think that has to do back with my childhood and experiences, but the ability to defend fairness. My verb was defend fairness wherever possible. And so I invite you to do the Taproot values exercise and to spend about 10 minutes. And the reason why is I really want you to think about what is the verb that you attach to the values, so that you can really think about how do you want to actualize those values, both in your decision making as a leader, but in the way you live your life. So it's 12:06 now. Let's try to reconvene at 12:21. And I think Joy has also posted the link in the chat. And feel free to chat with any questions, but otherwise we'll reconvene in about 10 minutes, so 12:15 or so. Let's take a few more minutes to finish up, and then we'll get back together and discuss. Okay. I don't know if you're still working on this, but if you have sort of completed this piece of the workshop, what were some of your how did it feel? Was it hard? Was it relatively straightforward? Was it easy to assign a verb or an action to your value? I'm curious to hear from you. Joy, go ahead.
This was hard. Because in addition to having, that whole list, trying to think, is there anything else, other values that I value that's not on here? And then just the process of now narrowing that down. And then, okay, now that I narrowed it down, now I need to group them into like categories.
Right.
And then now that picking that verb, it's definitely something that really takes additional thought of really putting yourself into that mindset of I'm going to do this and really look over my values. In a situation like this, all right, 10 minutes, timer started.
Right.
It's a little bit hard because then you feel like you're under the gun, but trying to come up with a verb for, some of those key areas. Looking at my list is because there's a lot I value, and as Houston said, overthinking it. Well, I value this. Well, which one do I value more? Then it turns into which one is on the higher on a higher spectrum than the other. Yeah, it's definitely challenging, and you have to really put your mind into it, focus on what you're trying to accomplish. Like I think verb, like encouragement, one of my employees told me that I continue to do that, to empower them and encourage them. So providing encouragement.
Nice.
Trying to find those right verbs that meet each one of those values. Can be challenging because there's so many verbs to pick from.
That's true, but it is a difficult exercise for a reason, and really focusing on 3 if you can, because that will help you really think about how you want to make decisions and how you want to turn up as a leader. And so if you had, for example, 7 or 8 values, that would be a little too overwhelming. Our brain doesn't allow for that many. I mean, 5 if you really got it together, but 3 is really a great number. And then thinking about what does that actually mean in terms of how you live that value is that next step that I think we often don't take, but is really helpful because it helps us to know how to make decisions and how to act. So thank you for sharing that, Joy. Scott, go ahead.
Just briefly. So what Joy said, it was kind of hard. And I never even got to the grouping piece, but I did kind of copy and transfer these onto Word docs. So I'm going to continue this down the road. But what really struck me is a couple things. How many of the values I actually selected. It seemed a little overwhelming, but what really struck me was there were a few on there that I looked at and was like, definitely not a value. Like, it really hit me in the feels. Like, that's not even close to being a value, right? So I think, in retrospect, I think what this teaches us, and I'll complete this again at a later time, but I think it teaches us what we really have this kind of, I don't know, visceral reaction to. And that in itself is a learning piece, I think, in this exercise. So I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I think that's really right. I mean, we look through all these words, and I think we do have a visceral reaction, and we should listen to that, right? So it says really back to being self-aware, aware of what values are important to us, maybe choosing three because it's hard to choose just three. And the practice of doing that, I think, helps focus us as well. So I appreciate that. Anybody else want to share anything about this exercise or the use of values in general in your leadership? If you put your hand up, you'll pop up to the top of my screen. Yes, I encourage you to. I encourage you to continue to work on this. So we're getting to the fifth of the practices of an authentic leader or authentic leadership. So just to recap a little bit, understanding your history, what events in your life have shaped you, what people in your life or role models have shaped you, understanding your personality, your strengths and your weaknesses, so that you can be very upfront about that with the people that you work with, but also selecting team members that can help you balance your strengths and weaknesses. One thing you want to avoid as you're building a team is having everybody with the same strengths, right? And so you're going to really being able to know yourself allows you to build a more effective team where you complement each other's strengths and weaknesses. And then the practice of having a self-reflective practice, which is always being thoughtful and asking for feedback, is really aligned with this idea of a growth mindset. And so reflecting on challenges, successes, leadership challenges that you encounter, either with people so that you can bounce ideas and brainstorm, or by keeping a journal. And then this idea of values for me is really hard exercise, but it is about really trying to concentrate down to the essence of what is viscerally important to you and how you want to show up. So the last of this practice is really being thoughtful about words and how words, the words that you describe, you use to describe people or situations, how the words that you choose to use really is really important and really makes a difference. So I wanted to share this reflection by Lao Tzu. It's actually misspelt here, but many of you have come across this. The idea that you need to be thoughtful about or watch your thoughts because they become your words, watch your words because they become your actions, which in turn become your habits, and then your character and your destiny. So the power of thought is very important, but also the words that you choose to use really shape who you become. And then there's one more exercise when don't have time for it now, but I would invite you to reflect on the sort of three narratives that we all have. So the story that you tell, which is sort of your LinkedIn profile, about yourself as a leader, the words that you might use to describe yourself. And, for example, I'm a confident, capable leader that delivers results. What are the kinds of words that you would choose to describe yourself? There's another narrative, which is the story that others tell about you, the words they use to describe you, probably when you're not in the room, but it might be interesting for you to ask close associates or colleagues, how would you describe me? And to check whether that the same kinds of words or the same kinds of descriptions in terms of the story that you tell and the story people tell about you, and whether there's any sort of deviation between those two. It's always interesting, I think, to hear about that. And then there's the story that you tell yourself. So that's the sort of the voice inside your head, which is often quite a critical voice. Oh, I'm not good enough at this, or people are going to find out that I'm kind of a fraud. That kind of internal narrative and the voices, and the words that you use to describe yourself. So the idea here is to sort of look for patterns and congruence between these three narratives. So we're not going to do that now, but I invite you to do that. And in particular, for the second narrative, do reach out to people that you work with or that know you well. It can be quite enlightening to see how they might describe you. This may be my most favorite quote of all time. This is by Viktor Frankl. Many of you probably have read his book. If you haven't, Man's Search for Meaning is an incredibly powerful but small book. And Viktor Frankl is survived Auschwitz concentration camp. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he's trying to make sense of who was able to survive and who wasn't. And it's not necessarily, was not determined by a person's physical strength and ability, but really about their mindset. And this quote is very powerful, because what he's saying is that between an event or a situation that occurs and your response to that event or that stimulus, as he calls it, there is a space. And in that space is our ability to choose our response. So when somebody says something a little unflattering or unkind, or something happens that makes us feel uncomfortable, we do have the power to choose our response to how we deal with that particular stimuli. And what's fascinating to me is that ability to choose our response. That is where we have both growth and freedom, and control over how we want to show up and how we choose to respond. We cannot always control what happens to us and the context in which we are operating as leaders. But what we can do is always we have a choice to decide how to respond, and the words we use to respond. And that gives, I think, for me at least, is incredibly empowering. And I hope it will be for you too. I wanted to leave a little time for questions, but I've added to the slide a couple of additional resources. The book by Bill George, who was my boss actually at Medtronic when I worked there throughout the 1990s. And then there's a couple of articles that push back a little bit against being an authentic leader, and that's worth reading as well, just to sort of temper the perspective of being or exercising authentic leadership. When might you not want to do that, or what does it actually mean to be an authentic leader, and what does it not mean? And then a couple of things on introverts and extroverts from a colleague, Arthur Brooks, as well as a more sort of academic analysis of authentic leadership. So hopefully that will be helppful. I'm going to scroll back to the very beginning and show maybe these are the leadership frameworks that we didn't go over, but you're welcome to take a look at those. And then let me just sort of leave you with this graphic, and happy to answer any questions or invite any additional reflections about this. And if you pop up your hand, I'll be able to see you. doesn't look like a lot of questions, so maybe I'll stop there. Joy has the PowerPoint presentation, so you can access that. I want to say thank you very much for your time. It was a real privilege and pleasure to be able to share some of this with you, and I hope you will use it in your own teams. And as you think about training for your organizations and how to build up the capacity, please do visit our website, Executive Education at the Harvard Kennedy School. We have a number of different programs. A new one, actually, that is thanks to you all, because we did a listening tour about a year and a half ago, and a number of you asked us to develop a program for early stage leaders, people transitioning from individual contributors to their first team leader assignment. And so we listened to you, and we developed a course specifically for that population. So please do check it out, as well as other programs that are designed for different levels of leadership in your organization. I also just wanted to say, I know these are very challenging times. And I really am super grateful to you all for your leadership within your organizations and for the work that you do every day to support people in your organization and to support this country. So thank you enormously, and hopefully this was helpful. I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions. And Joy, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
We truly appreciate you stepping in and being our first Growth Guild. You spoke at TOC 25 last year, and now you're our first Growth Guild session for 25-26 year. Thank you so much. And you can see all the thank yous that are in the chat, and hearts and thumbs ups and applause going up from across our attendance today. Everyone else, have a wonderful day. Join us next time. Please check our website again to see what the upcoming events are. We have a couple events that are exploring our new website and what our website can offer you as registrants and newsletter recipients as well. So thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you, Natalie.